You're listening to international investment advisor Doug Goldstein on the Goldstein on Gelt show, the financial show where we'll talk about how you can make the most of your money. With all the confusing financial chatter bombarding you each and every day, Goldstein on Gelt will give you the practical information you want and need about living a financially stable life. Here's your host, money maven Doug Goldstein.
Okay, we are back. We are talking to Professor Avrum Ehrlich, who is the Executive Director of the IsraelChina Institute. He was the founding director of the Israel Chamber of Commerce in China, and he is a senior partner at the Confucian Group in Jinan. Welcome, Avrum.
Hello, Doug. Thank you very much for having me on. Chuanjie Kuaila, a very happy spring festival. You the rabbit to our Chinese listeners.
Okay, thank you very much. Tell me something, how did you get so involved in working in China?
Well, I suppose it's about being in the right spot at the right time. I came to China about 6 years ago. We've got a family business there, and I gave some lectures in the Shanghai Academy of Social Sciences, and there I was forwarded on to a university of Shandong in Jinan, which is the capital city of the province. It's a small province of 100 million people on the east coast, and they had a very unusual center for religious studies, which they had just recently set up, and they were looking for a foreign appointment, a professor to teach Jewish thought and philosophy and Hebrew civilization. And I happened to be there and was the right suit for them, and it came to be.
Wow. So there's obviously a lot of Israeli businessmen and Israeli academics who are in China. Are the economic futures of Israel and China destined to coalesce?
That is a very pertinent question. Whether they're destined or not, certainly they're not destined. Although there is a very distinct synergy between the two nations, between the two peoples, and if it were well constructed, there could be a great relationship. Unfortunately, that is not where it's heading, because these things don't happen by chance. They really have to be very carefully cultivated. So
what would be needed in order to improve that?
Oh, well, as it happens, I've been writing white papers for on the subject of what Israel would have to do. Well, first of all, it's worthwhile pointing out, obviously, that the population of China is so large that it can hardly be called a country. It really should be viewed as a civilization, as many countries are. Europe, with its 300 or so million, and the United States with the same, still does not reach the size of China. So I think that when constructing a policy and a way to engage and interface with China, it really requires its own independent rules. China is very different, has evolved in an absolute isolation from the West. Its revolution, the recent opening up and development and reform of China is unusual it is probably the most curious economic structure to have emerged in the last 100 or 200 years. It is a new version of industrialization. They use completely different methods of political management informed by Confucianism and very distinct from the Judeo-Christian monotheistic ideas of justice and economy and of the rights of the individual. So I think that, and the role of government. So I think that it's a very complex way. It has to be started. If you want more, if you'd be more precise with your questions, I'll be glad to address it.
Mm-hmm. Well, at this stage, it seems that with Israel being a rather small country, are we in a position really to make inroads into China, or are we just yet another one of the many, many small countries who's trying to find a way to leverage the large number of Chinese?
Yeah, thank you very much for these questions. Yes, we are one of many people, and we don't have a lot to fall back on. We have a couple of, let's say, assets, cultural assets. The Jewish people are recognized very much in China. You can speak to really people from the farms, from the grassroots, and to academia, to socialists, to government people, to business people, and they all know about the Jews and have heard about the Jews and have a tremendous amount of respect for the Jewish people. That obviously can be leveraged. They also know about Israel's agricultural background and its formation. In fact, the histories of China and the histories of Israel are remarkably similar, and they have parallel roots. They both developed as socialist countries and both went through a reforming period. We have a lot to share in terms of the intellectual, ideological development and transition. We have a lot to share in terms of our academia and the types of academia that have emerged, oscillating between the right and the left. We have a lot in regards to agriculture, a tremendous amount. I believe that if were Israel to be involved in a forceful way, to make headway into the developing regional and provincial areas of China, it could really have a place under the Chinese sun. Obviously high tech and other areas, but every country is competing with those. I think that I think that in order to leverage the small place that Israel has, it needs to be well constructed and strategic. And if that is not done, and if we pursue the road to Chinese relations in a normal way, we will be like every other country, and that would be unfortunate, considering that China is a superpower of the 21st century. And until to date, the Jewish people have always had strategic relations with superpowers, and this will probably be the one that we will not have.
We are talking to Professor Avrum Ehrlich, who is the executive director of the IsraelChina Institute, and he is a senior partner at the Confucian Group, and he's been talking to us about the relationship between Israel and China. Avrum, a little while back on the show, we spoke with Saul Singer, who was the co-author of Startup Nation, which talks about how cool Israel is in being a startup nation, and we learned from him that the book was being translated first into Chinese because the Chinese are very anxious to learn about our mentality as a startup, as a country of people who can really start new ideas. Do you think that China can do that, or do they have a different mindset from us, and maybe they have a different path?
China has been in the past a deeply innovative country, although for the last 300 years it really has had a bit of a setback historically and developmentally. I believe that they can be very innovative, but because of the size and because of the nature of its government, it's a bit heavy, top heavy. It's hard for it to maneuver as quickly as a small economy can. There was a lot of criticism, self-criticism of China in the 1900s, the May 4th movement, which criticized China's inability to develop and to innovate, and they attributed it to Confucianism, that Confucianism was keeping it very rigid and non-questioning. And there's a very interesting dynamic here, because the principle of the Confucian idea is really to accept the authority of the master. And when it comes to this day and age, where questioning and argumentation and seeking alternative views is very important in modern technical and technological development, one might assume that Confucianism is not the most appropriate. Obviously, Talmudism and the rabbinic debate is very much suited, and in terms of a philosophy, in terms of an idea, and that has really embedded itself into the Israeli discourse, this dialectic and argument and non-agreement. Now, China won't be as quick and as able to change and adapt as Israel may be, but if Israel does not adapt, and it's not showing any indications that it is adapting to this very new century, then it's really pointless. China has got great resources, and it's a wealthy country, and it's definitely and absolutely committed to developing an innovative nation. And that's also an entry point into relations with Israel. But again, it's not just about observing our social consciousness as Israelis and as innovative people because of our situation of immigration, army, and whatever the arguments that Mr. Singer makes, but it's also about applying it. And that's where we've gone to a bottleneck, where the government is, whilst the people are very innovative, our government, I don't think, is as innovative, is as quick, and is as opportune. And I think that that's where the problems would be, and perhaps one might be able to find the solution in NGOs, non-government organizations, and semi-government organizations, and chambers of commerce. That in turn requires funding, and that's also one of the great problems.
I see. We have been talking to Professor Avrum Ehrlich, who is an expert in the Chinese, in what's going on in China, and certainly in travels back and forth between China and Israel to help develop relations. He is the founding director of the Israel Chamber of Commerce in China. Avrum, we're just about out of time, but could you tell us how people could learn a little bit more about the work that you're doing?
Yes, of course. I just wanted to make a correction. I was one of the founders of the Israel Chamber of Commerce in China. I wasn't the founding director. I was one of the 5 directors who set it up in a number of years ago, 4 years ago or so. You can find more information about my work through my website, www.IsraelChinaInstitute.com. People who are interested in coming to China, student exchanges, business people who are interested in cultural exchanges and nurturing are certainly welcome to contact me. We are doing interns in the Chinese provinces. Unlike Beijing or Shanghai, the provinces are really still very eager to receive foreigners. And I believe that Israelis who like to travel and who like to spend time in other cultures really do have an opportunity to spend time in China to learn the language and to develop remarkable business ties, again, on a grassroots level, on the ground, in the provinces, far away from the large capitals. So they're welcome to contact me.
Great. Professor Avrum Ehrlich, thank you very much for joining us.
Okay, so thank you very much for your time.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt show.